People think the story ended when Kanan walked away from Raquel, but that moment was only the spark. What came next wasn't peace, and it wasn't growth. It was the beginning of a slow, dangerous shift, one that would change Kanan forever and set up everything we see later in the Power universe. To understand the 10-year jump, you have to understand the exact place where Raising Kanan left him, caught between love and fear, loyalty and survival, childhood and the cold life waiting for him on the streets. The end of Raising Kanan leaves Kanan in one of the most confusing and vulnerable places of his life. He's young, angry, and tired of being pulled in different directions by people who all claim to love him but keep using him in their own battles. Raquel, who has spent the whole series trying to shape Kanan into the kind of soldier she wants him to be, has finally pushed him too far. Her lies, her secrets, and her need for control force Kanan to look at her differently. She's no longer the mother he admired. She becomes someone he fears, someone he can't trust. This shift sits heavy on him, because no matter how much he tries to deny it, family is still at the center of his world. At the same time, Detective Howard, the man who claims to be Kanan's real father, becomes a symbol of everything Kanan never asked for but now has to deal with. Their connection adds pressure, forcing Kanan into a storyline he never chose. Howard's survival and his push to stay close to Kanan keep the danger alive, because every step Kanan takes is watched, judged, and used by someone. Instead of escaping the streets, he finds himself deeper in them, surrounded by adults who are using him for power, protection, or revenge. The streets themselves are changing too. Raquel's empire is breaking. Her relationships with Lulu, Marvin, and even unique show cracks everywhere. Kanan sees the fall of the world he grew up in. The people who once looked unstoppable now look desperate. He realizes that nothing in this life is stable, not loyalty, not family, not even strength. Everything is temporary, and everything can disappear in one bad move. That truth sits in the back of his mind and begins to shape the man he will eventually become. Kanan's friends are also shifting around him. Famous, who was once just a harmless kid dreaming about rap, becomes a quiet example of how easy it is to get trapped in situations you're not built for. Jukebox, strong but deeply hurt, represents the emotional cost of this life. Her pain, her loneliness, and the way she learns to protect herself help Kanan understand that trust is dangerous and love can be used against you. These relationships matter because they show Kanan the two possible futures, one where he stays human, and one where he becomes hardened. All of this creates a powerful emotional storm inside Kanan. He feels betrayed, abandoned, and pushed into adulthood long before he's ready. The end of Raising Kanan doesn't give him closure. It gives him questions about who he is, who he can trust, and how he is supposed to survive when everyone around him is lying. And this is exactly why the 10-year time jump is so important. It begins at the point where Kanan is breaking. The boy we see at the end of the show is not the same man we meet in the original Power series. Something happens in those missing years, something dark, something painful, something that turns him into the ruthless version of Kanan Stark we all know. This moment, right at the end of Raising Kanan, is the line between two worlds. Behind him is the childhood he's trying to escape. Ahead of him is the life he's slowly being pushed into. And in that space between the two, he takes his first steps into becoming the person who will shape the entire Power universe. The 10-year jump in Kanan's story is not just a creative choice. It is the missing bridge between the confused teenager we last see in Raising Kanan and the dangerous, calculated man we meet in Power. That gap is where Kanan's real transformation happens. And the most important part is this: the audience doesn't get to watch it. We only feel the weight of it through the version of Kanan that appears later, older, colder, and carrying scars that were never shown on screen. This time jump matters because it allows the story to move from emotional struggle to raw survival. From the lessons Raquel forced on him to the life Kanan chooses for himself. At the end of Raising Kanan, Kanan is standing in the ashes of everything he thought he knew. Raquel's empire is collapsing. His family is divided. The streets are turning against them. That chaos is the doorway into the 10-year gap. The jump represents a period where Kanan has to learn how to survive without a safety net. He can no longer rely on Raquel's plans or protection. He cannot lean on the lies she fed him. He has to develop his own instincts. The moment he steps away from her, the world becomes bigger, messier, and far more dangerous than anything he has seen before. And the person he must become to navigate that world is nothing like the kid Raquel tried to control. What makes this decade so important is the slow, silent way it reshapes him. Trauma doesn't hit Kanan all at once. It builds over years. The betrayals settle in. The lies turn into lessons. The fear becomes part of his personality. The street life forces him to grow up faster than any normal kid, but this time, he's not growing into the image Raquel wanted. He's becoming the version of himself that the streets reward: hard, ruthless, always ready for violence. That change doesn't happen in a single season. It takes time. And the 10-year jump gives the audience the space to imagine how deep those changes run. Another reason this jump matters is that it reflects the shift in Kanan's mindset. As a teenager, he still questions things. He still hesitates. He still feels guilt. But 10 years later, the adult Kanan has none of that softness left. Something or many things in those years remove it from him. He becomes someone who thinks ahead, someone who trusts no one, someone who sees betrayal as normal. He becomes someone who can raise Ghost and Tommy in the game, and later turn against them without blinking. That transformation is not sudden, it is earned through a decade of surviving a life that gives no second chances. The jump also opens the door for Kanan's world to expand beyond Queens. During these years, he builds connections, learns the drug business on his own terms, and becomes a name that people fear long before the events of power. Without this jump, that version of Kanan would feel rushed or unrealistic. The decade fills the gap between the boy who made mistakes out of confusion and the man who makes decisions with intention, even if those decisions destroy everyone around him. Finally, the 10-year jump matters because it mirrors one of the core themes of the Power universe. No one becomes a monster overnight. There is always a path, a slow slide into darkness, pushed by pain, shaped by betrayal, and fueled by survival. Kanan's path happens off-screen, but its impact is huge. By the time he returns in Power Origins, he is no longer searching for himself. He already knows exactly who he is on. He is ready to build the legacy that will define the rest of his life. The 10 missing years in Kanan's life are like a locked room. We never see the details, but every version of Kanan that appears later, every choice he makes, every betrayal, every ruthless decision comes from whatever happened behind that locked door. These years are not just a time skip. They are the furnace that burns away the last pieces of the boy Kanan used to be. Everything he goes through in this decade shapes him into the man who becomes one of the most feared players in New York. This is where the real transformation begins. Slow at first, then so sharp and unforgiving that even Kanan himself forgets who he used to be. One of the biggest changes in this period is Kanan learning to stand on his own. After walking away from Raquel, he loses the structure she forced on him. No one to tell him what move to make next. No safety plan, no backup waiting in the shadows. For the first time, he sees the streets for what they truly are when you don't have power protecting you: unpredictable, unfair, and full of people who smile at you while plotting your downfall. This independence becomes the first lesson of the decade. Kanan learns that survival is not about strength alone, it's about control, awareness, patience. He learns to read people, to judge danger before it hits, to understand that every handshake has a hidden cost. These early years are where he builds the instincts that later make him a master manipulator. But independence is only one side of the story. The streets don't let anyone survive alone, not for long. So Kanan starts to form new connections, but he does it differently this time. He doesn't look for friends. He looks for tools, opportunities, and weaknesses he can use. These years teach him how to build a crew, not out of love or loyalty, but out of strategy. He begins to understand power dynamics: who follows strength, who follows fear, and who follows money. Slowly, he learns to lead not by chance or family ties, but by earning respect the hard way. This shift plants the seeds for the future alliances he forms with Ghost and Tommy. By the time he meets them, Kanan already knows how to spot talent, how to guide it, and later, how to break it when it threatens him. The most painful part of Kanan's evolution, though, comes from the cycle of mentorship and betrayal that shapes his worldview. Over these 10 years, he looks up to people who use him, trusts people who abandon him, and forgives people who later try to destroy him. Each betrayal cuts away something human inside him. Each loss builds a layer of emotional armor. He learns that loyalty is not something you give, it's something you trade. This mindset becomes one of the strongest pieces of adult Kanan's personality. It's why he's so quick to switch sides, so comfortable lying to people who love him, and so calm when violence is the answer. In these years, he stops expecting loyalty from others and starts using loyalty as a weapon. This decade also brings violence closer to him than ever before. Not the quick heat of the moment violence of a scared teenager, but the calculated violence of someone who has seen enough to understand that fear can be power. Kanan learns how to send messages without speaking. He learns when to act, when to wait, and when to let fear do the work for him. This is where he discovers the cold version of himself, the one who doesn't hesitate, doesn't apologize, and doesn't look back. Each fight, each deal, each near-death experience pushes him deeper into the mindset we recognize from Power. By the time these 10 years end, Kanan is no longer shaped by Raquel's choices. He is shaped by pain, street lessons, survival, and ambition. The boy who once doubted himself becomes a man who trusts only his instincts. The kid who once wanted approval becomes someone who takes whatever he wants without asking. The teen who struggled with fear becomes someone who uses fear to control others. These missing years are where Kanan stops running from the streets and starts mastering them. He becomes the architect of his own legacy, one built on power, strategy, and the belief that in his world, only the strongest survive. The 10-year gap doesn't just transform Kanan, it reshapes Raquel's entire world too. When Raising Kanan ends, Raquel stands at the edge of everything she built. Her empire is cracked, her family is scattered, and the control she once held so tightly is slipping right through her fingers. But Raquel is not the type of woman who simply disappears. Her story in those missing years plays a huge role in how Kanan evolves. Even if she isn't always close to him, what happens to her is a slow unraveling mixed with quiet rebuilding. A journey that shows how even the strongest figures in the power world can fall, adapt, and rise again in ways no one expects. The collapse of Raquel's empire forces her into a life she never imagined, one without power, soldiers, or the fear-driven respect that used to follow her everywhere. The streets that once obeyed her now whisper about her downfall. People she trusted either leave or betray her. The moves she once made with confidence begin to feel shaky, as if time itself is pushing her out of the game she dominated for years. This is a period where Raquel must confront something she always avoided, her own humanity. Without the empire to hide behind, she becomes a woman with wounds, regrets, and memories she can't escape. And the biggest one is Kanan. Losing him not by death, but by distrust is the scar she carries into the next decade. During these years, Raquel tries to rebuild herself, not just her reputation. Some imagine she leaves New York for a while, stepping into new cities where no one knows her name. Others believe she stays low, watching the streets from the shadows, studying how the game evolves without her. Either way, she becomes quieter, smarter, and more careful. She learns the weight of every mistake she made with Kanan. She reflects on the control she tried to force on him, the lies she told to protect her empire, and the damage those decisions caused. For the first time in her life, Raquel must live with the understanding that she pushed her own son away. That guilt becomes a silent part of her character during the time jump, a quiet pain behind the tough exterior. But Raquel has never been someone who stays weakened for long. As the years pass, she begins to rebuild not necessarily an empire, but her identity. She starts moving with precision instead of pride. She makes connections that don't depend on fear but on strategy. She starts evaluating alliances differently, knowing that the wrong choice can destroy everything. These years make her more calculated, not less. She may be less visible, but she is far from powerless. Raquel evolves into someone who no longer needs the spotlight to be effective. Her influence becomes subtle, but sharp, like a knife hidden until it's needed. Most importantly, Raquel's absence creates space for Kanan to become himself. Whether she steps away intentionally or circumstances force her to, that distance changes their relationship forever. Without her voice in his ear, Kanan learns to trust his own judgment. Without her rules, he tests the limits of his ambition. Without her protection, he becomes ruthless in ways she never imagined. Raquel's absence becomes one of the biggest influences on Kanan's growth because for the first time, he is navigating a world that isn't shaped by her decisions. The mother who once tried to mold him into her image becomes the silent force that pushes him to find his own. Yet no matter how far they drift, Raquel never stops watching Kanan from a distance. She keeps track of his rise, his survival, his growing reputation. Even if she isn't standing beside him, she is always aware of the man he is becoming. And deep down, she knows the truth. She created the foundation for who he is. Her lessons, her mistakes, and her strength are all inside him. Even if he denies it, by the time the 10-year jump ends, Raquel is no longer the queenpin she once was. She is something more complex, someone who carries the weight of her past but moves forward anyway. Someone who still has influence but uses it with restraint. Someone who understands the cost of power because she paid for it with her own son. And whether she steps back into Kanan's life or stays in the background, her presence remains a shadow that never fully leaves his story. The moment we step into Power Origins, we're entering a world that has been simmering for a full decade. 10 years of growth, loss, rebuilding, and silent transformation. This new series isn't just a continuation of Raising Kanan, it's a full reset of the tone, the energy, and the rules of the story. The time jump gives the creators room to drop us into a completely different era of Kanan's life, one where innocence is gone, the stakes are higher, and every choice pushes him closer to becoming the feared figure we eventually meet in the original Power. This shift isn't small, it's the doorway to a darker version of the universe, one that shows how the legends of Ghost, Tommy, and Kanan were truly born. The biggest change coming into Power Origins is the shift from teenage confusion to adult ambition. Kanan is no longer trying to understand the world, he is now trying to control it. The new series begins at a point where he has already learned the harshest lessons the streets had to offer. He understands the cost of loyalty. He understands the price of betrayal. He understands that power doesn't come from having muscle, it comes from knowing how to use people, how to build networks, and how to strike at the perfect moment. This is the version of Kanan who thinks like a leader, not a follower. The time jump gives the story a clean slate to show him stepping into this role with confidence instead of hesitation. Another key shift is the tone of the world itself. The early 90s glow of Raising Kanan begins to fade, replaced by a grittier, sharper environment. The music, the clothes, the street corners, the entire crime landscape evolve. The era has changed, and with it, the style of hustling. New types of crews rise. New money starts flowing. The drug game becomes more organized, more dangerous, and more influenced by bigger criminal players. Power Origins uses this decade shift to explore a richer, more layered New York, one where danger doesn't wait on the corner. It moves in silence, in meetings, in alliances that can collapse with one wrong word. This world demands a different kind of player, and Kanan is stepping into it with both knowledge and hunger. But the most exciting part of Power Origins is how it positions the beginnings of one of the most important relationships in the entire franchise: Kanan, Ghost, and Tommy. The seeds of their connection were never explored in Raising Kanan because Kanan was still too young, still too tied to Raquel, still too caught in his own struggles. In these missing years, he becomes the version of himself who can spot potential in others, who can see talent, ambition, and desire in the younger Ghost and Tommy. Power Origins is the bridge that shows how they meet, how their loyalties form, and how Kanan becomes their mentor, teaching them everything from street rules to the art of power. This dynamic doesn't just build the future, it starts shaping the chaos that destroys them all later. The time jump also opens space for new conflicts. Without Raquel controlling the table, Kanan starts building his own rivalries. The series can introduce new threats, bigger players, smarter enemies, and people who already hold territory and don't want a young, rising hustler challenging them. These enemies push Kanan to evolve even further. They force him to plan instead of react. They force him to become ruthless in a way he wasn't before. Power Origins becomes the place where Kanan learns not just how to survive the game, but how to dominate it. And while the series focuses heavily on Kanan, it doesn't erase the impact of the Thomas family. Raquel, Marvin, and Lou may step back, but their fingerprints are still on Kanan's choices. Their teachings, both good and bad, live inside him. The show uses the time jump to create